Hello, I'm Scott Wintrip. I'm the author of High Velocity Hiring, How to Hire Top Talent in an Instant. On today's show, we're going to talk about the fact that hiring doesn't have to be a hassle. You can eliminate your stress and the overwhelm of recruiting and hiring, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so that you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. But today we're going to be taking an insider look at what happens when a high-performing individual walks away from your organization and the position remains open too long. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And you can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Tuner.fm, Stitcher, and a bunch of other great outlets. And of course, you can now tune in through terrestrial radio. We're on 11 FM stations around the United States and 5 AM stations, including 87.9 FM in Macon, Georgia. So tune in there too. All right, if you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with over 3 million downloads and plays. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And also G&A have also cited us as in the top 10 podcasts for HR pros and managers. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to iTunes, to iHeart, to Spotify, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, sales leader, or a leader in any capacity, you know hiring and keeping top talent is a huge priority. The challenge facing most companies is when it comes to someone walking away, a delay in the hiring process and finding the right person to replace them is not only costly, but it becomes accumulatively so over time. So the obvious question is, how can we speed up the hiring process while making sure we hire the right person? Well, stay tuned because our guest today is Scott Wintrip. He is the author of High Velocity Hiring, How to Hire Top Talent in an Instant. Named a must-read book by HR Magazine. Over the past 19 years, Scott has led the Wintrip Consulting Group, a global consultancy that has helped more than, wait for it, 22,000 organizations build talent-rich companies that have eliminated their hiring delays. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Scott Wintrip. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Dov. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm honored.
Thank you, sir. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
So, you know, this is your world. This is the hiring world, putting the right people in the right place at the right time. So I'm going to just jump right in. Maintaining a team of high-performing people to serve customers, especially company, it's a very stressful thing. Finding those right people, making sure they're there. Right now, if we were chatting to a leader who was totally stressed out about that, so about finding that, like, they know this person's leaving, they got to replace them really quick, what would be the first thing you'd say to that person?
So I'm going to back up one step, if I may. I want to talk to that leader before that seat opens up. Because the old way of hiring is you keep a job open until the right person shows up.
Right.
And when that happens, if I'm that leader, I suddenly go from having one job to now having three. I've got my regular job.
Right.
I've got to manage the workload of that open seat. And on top of all of that, I've got to conduct hours of interviews to fill that job. That's why an open seat's like an open wound. It is a painful distraction. So before that seat ever opens up, I want to talk to that manager about the new way of hiring. And the new way of hiring is you line up talented people, and then you wait for the right job to show up. And when you do that, I no longer have to do 3 jobs at once. I can just do mine, and I can do it well.
The rule of hiring has always been hire slow, fire fast. I'm guessing you don't think that's true.
No, that's one of the counterproductive mindsets that I spotted. Be slow to hire and quick to fire. Hiring is an interruption. Why? Because I'm doing 3 jobs at once when that seat opens up. So if I'm slow to hire, every day that goes by, I'm doing those 3 jobs at once. And this is one of the reasons, this slow to hire, quick to fire mindset, it's one of the reasons that hiring, the time it takes to hire, has reached a new all-time high every single year, each of the past 3 years. It took 28 days in 2015, that grew to 29 in 16, and then a whopping 30 days in 2017, which if you do the math, that's more than 240 hours or more that a manager had to deal with that empty seat.
So I'm sort of thinking about this at a couple of different levels. I'm thinking about it at a smaller business level, a company that doesn't have hundreds and hundreds of employees. When you talk about find the right person, and then when there's the right space, you put them in it. But I'm guessing that some of our listeners, viewers who are in that category might be thinking, well, I can't give them a job to do while they're waiting for the right position to open up. So how do we deal with that? I mean, do we just send them a little note saying, listen, you're fabulous. Please keep your life on hold until we have an opening?
Yeah. Dov, this is probably the question I get more than any other, especially for the small business owner. So the answer is you're not putting somebody up on a shelf somewhere. Last time I checked, that's an illegal practice called kidnapping. So we're not going to go there.
Oh, come on. You said you had radical ideas.
Well, radical but not illegal ideas.
There's a minor tweak there.
Minor tweak, yeah. So talented people, the more talented somebody is, the more they realize they need options, because the only thing that's certain in life is change. So if I'm a top talented person, I'm going to keep irons in the fire.
Right.
I'm going to talk to other key employers out there. And if I've got several key employers who have talked with me and are ready to hire me the instant the job becomes open, my employment situation went from secure to infinitely secure. If anything happens with this current job, if my company is sold, if my work situation changes, my boss, who I've loved for years, is suddenly gone and I'm working for a bonehead to clean up what I was actually thinking, I now have other options. So talented people love options. That's what we're talking about today. Is I'm lining up 1 or 2 or 3 at most talented people for that one core job, maybe 2 core jobs that I have. That takes half or less the amount of time than the traditional approach of I'm managing 3 jobs at once. I've got to conduct hours of interviews. It's always been said that working ahead is better than working behind. This is simply another form of working ahead.
So let's imagine I've got that size of company. I think that for most employers, unless somebody's really dissatisfactory, most of them, in my experience anyway, are often quite surprised when a top player leaves them, because oftentimes they seem very happy and then they're suddenly gone, often on a shorter notice. So are you saying to that CEO, that founder, listen, that guy you've got, that lady you've got who's the top person, you need to find a replacement for that person before they walk away?
Oh, absolutely. People are not permanent.
Right.
Processes are, companies are, as long as they have enough people, but people are not. Things happen every single day. Yes, my top player may not leave me on purpose, but what if their spouse gets this amazing promotion that can't be turned down and they want to keep their marriage?
Right.
What if, God forbid, they get hit by a bus? what if, the what ifs happen all the time. So yes, and we're not looking at it from the standpoint of our top people. We're looking at it from our core roles. In the book that I wrote that you mentioned, I delineate roles into 3 categories. Okay. Core roles, those are the roles that are absolutely essential. Because of their extreme importance, they have to be filled quickly. Then we have essential.
Is that C-suite? Is that the way to understand that?
No, it happens at all levels. So for example, in an organization whose bottom line is driven by sales, you can almost always bet that the salespeople will be one of the core roles. Right. In a creative agency, for example, a different kind of business where their product is the creative product they develop, those graphic designers and user experience folks are probably the core roles. So it's different. And yes, it may or may not be the C-suite. Here's what's interesting. The C-suite are often the roles that are the next tier down, either essential or supportive. Why is that? Well, they've charted the direction of the company, and because the direction has been charted, that role can actually sit empty a little longer than other roles because the path was already created. It's the people who do the work from day to day, the folks who are serving customers or selling product or delivering or creating that product that we tend not to be able to live without. So it's those core roles that we want to make sure that we're lining up talented people and then waiting for the right jobs to open.
It feels a bit sneaky. Feels like I would be having coffee with these people, meeting these people with the idea that, and saying, there's no role yet, there's nothing open. We just like to find out who's out there in the world, blah, blah, blah. All that sounds great. And then the person that I just had coffee with, we all live in a small world now, has a conversation that, hey, I spoke to Scott and about this role. Well, that sounds like my job. Is my job threatened? That's not a great way to keep loyalty. So walk us through that, because that sounds like I've either got to sneak around or that person whose position it is could feel very threatened and you can actually end up pushing them away because they don't feel like they've got loyalty from you as the employer.
So you mentioned early on that I've done this process now 22,000 times, and it's actually more than that number because those numbers were of last year.
Right.
And the conversation goes along the lines of what you said with a couple differences. One is complete transparency. And I talk about this in my book. I refer to it as a rising tide of talent. And the way it goes is a rising tide of talent lifts all careers. Right. And I can't lift my career, I can't lift other people's if I'm careers if I'm relying so much on them to do the work in the job they're in right now. So many people are failed, the promotions fail because there's nobody to take their place. Right. So there's transparency in this. And I would say to you as an employee, we're going to be creating a rising tide of talent in this organization. We're going to be lining up talented people. So when the jobs open, we don't have to delay promotions. I don't have to talk about threats of firing. People know they have to do their jobs or they're going to have to find another job. So with that kind of transparency, then I can go into the marketplace and I can say, Dov, we do things differently in our company. We don't wait till jobs open to line up top people. We talk to people and build relationships, and then we wait for the right jobs to open. This gives you an opportunity in the future if you want it, and it gives us an opportunity in the future if we'd like to work with you. Would you like to have that conversation? To me, this is a bit of an intelligence test. If somebody says no to that, I question whether or not they're top talent, because talent people get it. They know that to remain gainfully employed, to keep their skills fresh, they need options because they never know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. We all have choice here, so we're giving people choices. Nobody's being forced. And it's only sneaky if you make it sneaky. Mm-hmm. To me, it has to be transparent.
Right. And that's what I think is important. That's why I brought that up, because I think
I'm glad you did.
Very easy for people to immediately go to start sneaking around. That's not what you're talking about at all. In the book, you talk about the need to be really clear with everybody.
Yeah, Dov, let me put it this way. Everybody is available. And my proof in that is both you and I do our own thing. Yet, if somebody came along with a good enough offer to you or to me, even though we run our own enterprises here, I'm pretty sure you'd listen just like I would. Now, to give up doing my day job, to have give up the freedom that I have, it'd have to be pretty amazing. And it would have to be meaningful work that paid me well, that gave me the flexibility I have today. But doggone it, I would listen. I don't know of anybody who wouldn't listen. And that's the idea behind this is everybody is a free agent. Yes, we may have a career, we may have an obligation, we may have a contract, but at the end of the day, we all have choice because indentured servitude went out a long time ago. And as long as we keep that in mind, it's our duty and responsibility to our organizations to make sure that we're talking with people so seats are no longer empty, especially for those core roles.
And that is so often the challenge is that those seats sit empty way too long, as you said, and we know the cost of leaving those seats empty is incredible. Now, you have an agency that does this. You have a consulting. You make sure that helping other people to do that. And I actually was working with a client recently who also has a similar idea, places people in the right place, etc. And so we were discussing the fees of that because I had never done that, so I didn't know. And I was really quite surprised about, holy crap, really? It costs this much to find somebody to go in that position? And this, I thought this was really great conversation because I wanted to bring it to this conversation between you and I because I think for our listeners, I don't think most people realize what it costs, not just to hire your consultancy, your agency, to put the right person in place, but what it costs to not put them in place. Talk to us about what that cost is. I mean, you've talked about it at one level, which is the manager is now doing 3 jobs, which is a huge cost.
Yeah. You say this well. So the beginning of my career, I was a headhunter when we proudly called ourselves that.
Right.
And then I worked in the consulting end of things. And now as a consultant, I teach organizations how to do this hiring on their own, including working with outside agencies.
Right.
And while I don't place people in jobs anymore simply because there's too much of this work in teaching the process, there are lots of good agencies out there.
Sure.
And you ask an important question about the cost. So we did the math one day. I actually created a 2-charted column on a piece of paper. And the left-hand side was all the costs associated with hiring and all the steps of the long, drawn-out process of hiring the way it's typically done. And then on the right-hand side, working with an agency. The cost was actually lower in working with an outside agency when they were able to find you talent. Why is that? Well, their efforts are usually guaranteed. They'll replace somebody who doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Your efforts on your own are not. This is why I actually suggest to people, you have to do both at once. And in my book, I talk about something called candidate gravity. It's the force that a company has on the marketplace. It's the pull that they have on talent. And one of the things I identified in my work is that there are 8 different ways, 8 streams of talent for drawing people in. Each stream taps into unique people. And yes, some streams have overlapping access to the same talent, but no single stream can bring in every qualified person. One of those streams is outside agencies. They have unique access to talent. They have contractors and full-time employees that only they represent. And so while leveraging them, while leveraging the other 7 streams, if I leverage all of those streams, a couple things happen. 1, I have more people than I can ever hire.
Yes.
2, I will find people that I can't find anywhere else. But here's the fun thing. When I leverage all 3, that actually takes less time and effort than leveraging 1 or 2. Why is that? Well, if I'm only leveraging a couple talent streams, I'm overfishing an overtapped stream. Mm-hmm. Versus when I tap into all 8, it takes less effort. So going back to your original comment, the cost, it is much more costly to have a seat open. There's lost opportunity. There's the cost of replacement. There's the cost of teaching. There's the cost of lost customers versus somebody in that seat. Even if it costs me lots of money up front, a big investment, I'm going to recoup that over time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the streams that I think that I know in my work, in the work that we do, it's based around loyalty and finding and keeping top talent. And one of the things that we say to the companies out there is, if you want to find and keep top talent, one of the best ways you'll do it is through your culture, through the culture you already have. And that is by having a purpose-driven organization. Because people want to work in meaningful work. They want to do meaningful work, and if they find it meaningful, they may still be inspired to grow and change and develop and maybe move on, because you and I both know people are not sticking around for 20 or 40 years anymore. Those days are well gone.
Yeah.
But if I loved working for Scott, and it was a great company, and I loved your culture, and I loved the purpose of the organization, I'm just leaving for my own growth, my own whatever it is I can get out there in the world. But my friend Bob is looking for a position. I become evangelical for your company. And I think that so often companies forget that. They have their previous employees or the ones who are walking away leave with a bad smell. You know, they're like about that company. And that's a huge mistake. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I want people to grasp that stream.
So my favorite part of your book is when you talk about the number one priority is making sure people have meaningful work. You nailed it.
Thank you.
And I want to talk about that. I'm going to come back to that, if we may, in a moment in regards to hiring profiles, because there's a direct connection between accuracy of hiring profile and meaningful work.
Right.
To answer your question, I love what you said about evangelists. Sometimes that rising tide of talent that I talked about causes people to rise out of the organization.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'll back up. Well, my lesson on this came from a boss. And I asked him early in my career, I said, I was fast tracking. I wanted to rise up. And I said, what's the fastest way to get promoted? And I actually asked it in front of a whole bunch of other managers at a management meeting. And he looked at us and he had this great Southern drawl. And he says, well, Scott, you and everybody else here has to make yourself expendable. And it was so quiet. And I watched all these heads turn towards me, and I could feel their evil glares, because you don't ask questions like that. And he saw it, and he was smart. And he went on to say, now I'll stop the Southern drawl. He says, we can't promote you if we still need you in your current role. Well, that stuck with me. It stuck with me for years. And he also went on to say,
I want you to stop, because that is profound, and I want people to get that.
Yeah.
Because particularly those of us who are older, we were trained, make yourself indispensable. But this man's advice was completely the opposite and so powerful. So I want you to say that part again, because I want our listener to really get that. Because whether you are a hiring person or you're a be hired person, and chances are you're both at any point in time, you need to get this. So again, please give it to us, Scott. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but it's powerful.
No, you're spot on. So the quickest way to promotion is to make yourself expendable. And why is that important? Because your company cannot promote you if they really need you that badly in your current role. And to go on to what you said, this is why not only is it promotion from within, it is promotion from without. Meaning sometimes when people make themselves expendable, they're leaving your organization. They have grown as much as they can grow, and they have to go a different direction. And I agree with you. When that happens, and I'm the leader who led that person, and I have gotten them as far as I can get them, and I send them on their way. If you love something, set it free. Talk about loving somebody in their career, and that love is going to come back. They're going to be that evangelist that you talked about. And I've seen it time and time and time again, whether they rise up in the organization or rise out. These people become the biggest raving fans. And talk about the referrals that you get, the accolades, just the good verbal press. This is what we should be doing as leaders. Our true measure as a leader is not that we're making our own selves better and promoting our own careers, but we're promoting the careers of others. In fact, I'm a better leader if somebody not only rises to my level or above me. If they rise above me, I'm an amazing leader.
Yes.
It's not about me rising above them. And as long as we remember that, we're only one person. All of the people around us are truly the ones who do the work. If I lead in this way, where I work with them so they're expendable in their current role, so they can keep rising up or rising left or rising right, I'm doing a great job. And then going back to meaningful work in your book, talk about meaningful. I'm investing in people in a way that makes them better. because they've worked with me, not for me, but they've worked with me. And I've made them better. They make the organization better. And even if they rise out, that still makes the company better because there's somebody else to rise up and they're out there and they're that evangelist that you talked about.
The challenge, though, is the fatal flaw of poor leadership is ego. And you talked about having somebody rise up and beyond you.
Yes.
And so very, very often, even good leaders who don't quite get to great, but they get to good.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Like, you've come up, but now you're getting on par with me, buddy. Let's just calm that baby down a little bit. Let's just give you a little couple of pokes in the side, and bring you down to size, and let's remind you who's boss. Right? Yank that down.
Gotta beat him down.
Cut the head off that puppy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right.
How do we get those leaders to put their own ego to the side a little?
By helping them not have to put their egos to the side. And here's what I mean by that.
Okay.
Years ago, there was a quote. I don't know where it comes from, but it stuck with me. And the quote is, "I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I am responsible for my next action." So I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I am responsible and can do something about my next action. When my boss said that to me years ago, I didn't go, "Wow, that's easy. I'll just go do that." No, I mean, that scared the crap out of me.
Sure.
And it scared the crap out of me because if I make myself expendable, I may become expendable.
Yes.
There actually may be somebody who was better equipped to do my job. And guess what? There was. And my first thought was, if I keep helping this person, I may help myself right out of a job.
Mm-hmm. That's the fear that comes up.
My first thought. I'm not responsible for that. And I'm not so, I think, Dov, you're right. In some cases, that's ego, unhealthy ego. And in other cases, it's natural fear and self-preservation.
Sure.
If I'm always doing the next right thing, though, I'm going to be okay. Even if that person rises up and I'm now out of a job, I can take credit for that to some degree if I helped with that. And I'm going to be okay in my next role in or out of the organization. So that's why I say I'm not responsible for that first thought. It may be fear, it may be self-preservation, it may be ego. I am responsible for my next action. And I use this quote in all aspects of my life. My first thought at times isn't pretty, it's not healthy. Sometimes it's about ego, other times it's about fear. And I often ask myself, okay, so what's the next right thing for me to do here? Even though I'm having this thought, this fearful thought, accurate or not, what's the next right thing? As a leader in an organization, it is never right for me to hold anybody back. Mm-hmm. And even though it may scare me, I'm doing right by that person, I'm doing right by that company, I'm also doing right by me. Because at the end of the day, even though I may be taking a risk, air quotes, I'm doing right by three parties, and I have integrity. I can go home, I can look myself in the mirror. Versus I go home and I did something to tamp down somebody's career today. If I have a conscience, and I think many leaders do, that's going to feel pretty crappy, and it's going to catch up with me. That psychic karma, believe it in it or not, it's going to come back. So first thought, next action. I'm not responsible for that first thought, but I am responsible for my next action. Yeah, and as long as I keep that in mind, I'm going to keep doing the next right thing if I make that choice to do so.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And hopefully some of that leaked into some of the right minds. Fingers, legs, and everything else crossed. You say that there are 3 steps to engage for fast and accurate hiring. Can you walk us through those, please? Because I think that, again, like we talked about before, I think there's some very old paradigms about hiring. And you've got a very different way of looking at it. And I want everybody to grasp this, like right out the gate here.
Sure. So the first step we've touched on, and that's we've got to start changing counterproductive mindsets.
Right.
We've talked about one. Let's talk about one other. And it's a pervasive, it is an insidious mindset that the long time it takes to fill a job is a result of a talent shortage.
Right.
And there's been some interesting research done on negative mindsets. Negative mindsets actually undermine creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Positive mindsets and positive emotions make us more creative. So if we feel like we're a victim, well, there's so many jobs and only so many people to fill them, that is an unconscious, at times, victim mentality, and it sets the mindset, there's nothing I can do about this problem. This is the way it is. So we do nothing to change our process. Versus, when people say, well, there's so many jobs and not enough people to fill them, their companies aren't trying to fill all of those jobs, just their own. And when looked at in that mindset, they've got just a handful of jobs and all those thousands of people who could fill them. Now that creates a belief in me that I can solve this problem. And that's where I start with the companies that I work with, the 22,000 plus that you talked about, is we look at the counterproductive mindsets, including that the skills shortage is to blame for slow hiring. You have to be slow to hire, quick to fire. Hiring is HR's job. That's another one I hear from leaders, so they have no responsibility in this. And we counter those mindsets. We look at how they're inaccurate. We look at how they're corrosive and how they undermine the leadership psyche. Mm-hmm. So we start countering those negative beliefs. That leads us now to the second step.
Right.
And the second step is where we hire with our heads and not our hearts. And why that's important, we can look at dating as a really good example. If you think about it, dating and interviewing have a lot in common. Both are about getting to know one another better, helping us to determine if someone's a good fit or not. And if we do them right, we can end up with a long-term relationship, be it at work or at home. Well, if we don't use our heads and we lead with our hearts, we're going to get hurt, not just in dating, but in interviewing. Feelings become false evidence all too often that someone fits a job when they really do not. Mm-hmm. I conducted a comprehensive study in 2015 of failed hires. And we defined a failed hire as employment lasting less than 6 months.
Right.
9 out of 10 managers in that study said that they had interfering emotions that contributed to the failed hire. So one of them was overwhelmed with having to do 3 jobs at once. Another one was fearfulness of losing a good candidate. But the most prevalent emotion mentioned by more than 70% of the managers was likability. They liked the person being interviewed. And often these people said, oh my God, I could tell that they were going to fit. I liked them. And what they said was liking somebody allowed them to overlook something they didn't, that didn't fit, or overlooked the fact that they missed a skill. And that's why those hires fail. So we hire with our heads. We have a hiring profile that has a list of must-haves, I call those deal makers, and a list of must-not-haves, deal breakers. Somebody must have every one of those deal makers to be hired and none of the deal breakers. If I follow that one rule, I'm hiring with my head and never my heart, my feelings don't get in the way. So if I counter mindsets that are counterproductive, I'm hiring with my head, not my heart. Now our third step is we seek proof instead of promises. So, in a traditional interview, Dov, if I'm interviewing you, you're going to be on your best behavior. And you're you're just like dating. You're going to do what I call the tell, the sell, and the swell. You're going to tell me what you think I want to hear. You're going to sell me on the best parts of your work history and abilities. And you're going to try and swell my ego. Now, if you do these things, and you're likely to do so, does this mean you're being dishonest? No, it's human. It's natural that people only disclose those aspects that land them the job. The problem is this interferes with making a good fit. So that's why I say you seek proof instead of promises. I take that profile I described in step 2, and I have you perform sample work. I can see, hear, and experience whether or not you can do work. I can see if you fit in, hear how you'll get along with others, and experience the quality of your work. I can check off the things on that list. Right. And if you have everything that's a requirement, I hire you. If you have any of those deal breakers, I don't hire you. So if we don't have those counterproductive mindsets, if we have the profile, if I can see proof, you're going to be a good fit.
So let's take this to the other side for a moment. It may not be a contradiction. It might be. I'm interested in your feedback on this. I know for sure, I believe with all my heart, you can train skills, you can't train attitude.
Yes.
So you meet somebody, You like them. They've got a great personality. They've got a great attitude. They're lacking in a couple of skills that I could certainly train them in. It sounds like what you're saying is don't hire them. Sounds like. I'm not saying that's true.
No, it depends on the circumstances. There are certain roles where when somebody walks in the door, on day one, they must have certain skills. So for example, let's go back to that sales role that I was talking about before. If I need a salesperson who's going to hit the ground running, going to generate revenue for the company and build out a territory, then yes, they're going to have those skills. But I may have a junior sales hire where those skills are at the bottom of the list. At the bottom of this profile I mentioned to you, there are some pluses and minuses. Those are the nice to have or the things you don't prefer not to have, but they're not a knockout factor. If it's for a junior sales role where it's somebody where I have time to mentor them and bring them along and teach them those skills, then those wouldn't be up on that profile. Same thing with that creative role I mentioned before. If I need somebody who's going to hit the ground running and design beautiful graphics for customers within a couple days of getting on the job, I don't have time to teach those skills. But again, if it's a junior level, I might have it. So it depends on the role. Certain cases I can teach skills, in other cases I don't have time to teach them. But you're certainly right about, there are certain inalienable traits that I must have. I can't teach somebody to be a nice person. I can't teach them to get along. I can't teach them to have a better personality. So those things will probably remain consistent, whether it's the junior role, the mid-level role, or the senior level role.
Yeah, it's interesting because you and I use the same analogy. I've used the same analogy in my work, which is dating. Because I say that when we go out on a date, what we're actually saying is, hi, who do you want me to be?
Right. Yes.
Right? We're not actually saying who we are. We're actually trying to find out who you want me to be so I can show up as that. There's a great story from years ago. I was dating a girl. I was trained as a psychotherapist, so psychological health, emotional health is very important to me. And I dated this girl, and I said, have you done any therapy, any work on yourself? We're dating a little while, just sort of finding out. And she goes, oh, yeah, I have a therapist. I go, oh, this is great. She's self-examining. She has self-knowledge. This is great. Few months into the relationship, some shit happens and, she's fallen apart for whatever reason. I said, well, I guess you have an appointment with your therapist soon. She goes, well, no, I haven't booked one yet. And I go, well, don't you have a regular one? She goes, oh, no, I only go see her 3 or 4 times a year when I need her. Oh, my God. Right? So she obviously showed up the way I wanted her to show up. Not her fault, actually my fault, because I was looking for, and this is, I think, the part of the challenge of it, is we look for what we want to see instead of seeing what's in front of us. Because I'm actually a big advocate for hiring from the heart, but use your head, right? Yes. So, and I think that very often it's either or, and it's not. So, like we said, there are certain personality things that I want there. I want to see that those are there. But I also think, and using the same analogy of dating, and I say this to people all the time, I say, if you own a company, and it's $1 billion company, and you think, you know what, I'm kind of tired, I want a business partner, and somebody walks in who's got a nice ass and nice eyes, do you go, you should be my partner?
Right.
Of course you don't. You go, this is $1 billion company, let me see if there's a fit, where's there a fit, what are your skills, what are you bringing to it, how do you add value? You don't go, but you've got beautiful sparkly eyes and a nice ass. You don't do that. No. But we do that in relationships. But I think that we do that to some degree even in business. And we've got, so I agree with you, there's a need for us to know what I call, what's my non-negotiables.
Yes.
This is non-negotiable. You're lovely, you're wonderful, you're fantastic in all kinds of ways, but you don't have this. And that's non-negotiable in this role. And so I think that's a very important piece for everybody to get. I love what you're saying there about work out what is non-negotiable, get clear on that. And I think because if you're not clear on it, it's very easy to become swayed by the next fabulous personality that walks in the room. So that's great insight. Thank you. Yeah, really good.
Well, you sparked something for me is the tell, sell, and swell. That's what she was doing with you. She told you just enough. Oh, yes, I go to the therapist, but there was a rest of the sentence 3 to 4 times a year. But she didn't leave that part in. She left it out because that's the tell, sell, and swell. We do it to ourselves. And you said this well, Dov, is I tell myself, pay attention to these aspects, Scott, but not these, because I really like this person and I see how well they fit in. We sell ourselves on other people because we're so desperate to fill that role because it's been open for weeks. And we try to swell their egos because it's a competitive marketplace and candidates have choices. And so we end up, I often say this, it's like a bad marriage where, a few days after the marriage, you look at each other and you go, what did we do? It happens on day one in employment. The courtship is over, the person shows up, and you look at each other and go, what were we thinking?
Exactly.
But of course, we've invested all this time, so we're going to try and make it work. Well, we know how that one usually ends up.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you spoke about in the book that I think is very interesting, you talk about measuring talent wealth. How can our listeners, our viewers, do that in their organizations? Measuring talent wealth.
Yeah, so big topic, so I'm going to point them to a free resource, but let me give them a quick overview. Companies are either talent rich, talent poor, or somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. And there are tremendous implications that come with this. Now, how did I discover this? In the course of doing my work, it became very clear that there were 4 types of companies. There were the talent-rich companies that excelled. They're not looking in the rearview mirror. They are the trendsetters. They are innovating. They are leaps ahead, and everybody else is trying to be them. Then there are the talent-strong companies. And talent-strong companies are competitive. They're just not quite at the talent-rich level. They win more than they lose. They occasionally create innovation. They're good places to work, but they're not quite at that highest level. Mm-hmm. And we have the biggest group of companies, and they're talent stable. And they work really hard. They're stable, but they're not winning all the time. They're not losing all the time. They're somewhere in between.
Right.
Then they have a group of companies. They're the talent poor companies. And it is a struggle for them to stay alive. Every day is a battle. Mm-hmm. These talent rich, stable, strong, and poor companies are made up of departments with the same labels. And what I discovered is if you rank your different departments, it tells you where to pay attention as a leader. So if I've got a really good company, but it's only talent strong, if I figure out which of my departments is dragging it down, I can look at the talent there and I can look at how long it's taking to fill jobs and the quality of the talent, and I can do an upgrade. We can marshal all resources in that area. If we look at this on a quarterly basis, which is what I recommend that leaders do, this becomes our best predictor of future performance because it's my internal wealth that creates the external profitability that's generated by my company. It's generated by people. So this talent wealth spectrum, as I like to call it, is just like wealth in society. We have different strata in society of wealth. We have this different strata, 4 levels in companies. And so the resource I'll point people to, there's a great site called changethis.com. It's a manifesto website. And on changethis.com, if they either look up my name, Scott Wintrip, or there's a report that we did that has the whole talent wealth spectrum and how to use it, and it's completely free. It's called The Competitive Advantage of a Talent-Rich Organization. They can download that for free, and it'll walk them through how to do this ranking, how to improve wealth within departments, and even do some of the steps that we talked about today.
Fabulous. That's awesome. Thank you. I think that from the outside, people who are successful look like it was an overnight success or it was a straight line from the outside. And it's fascinating to me because I meet people who are extraordinarily successful who think that about others, who know it's not true, but they think it's true about the other person. So one of my favorite questions to ask my guests is, what was a turning point in your life, in your leadership, in your business philosophy that changed the trajectory of how you were going?
It happened very early in my career when I became a recruiter.
You were fortunate. It was early.
It was, and it was a complete and total accident because I was a music major in college, and then I became a hiring expert. Go figure out that connection. Good luck. And I didn't like being a music major. I'm too social to be stuck in a practice room for as many hours as they told me I needed to be. So I stumbled on the hiring profession. In college, I walked into a temporary agency. I was looking to make beer money. And while there, they saw something in me and they said, have you ever considered this industry? And I literally blurted out, what industry? Because I didn't know that it was an industry. But I thought about that, and I was so intrigued by the fact that you can make a good living helping companies with their most important asset and helping people with one of the most important aspects of their lives. So before I left school, I started in the employment industry. And what I noticed very early on was that every company looking for employees needed them yesterday. So, and these same companies were taking a long time, even back then, 30 years ago, to hire people. So I realized that this is a process problem and that being stuck in doing anything slowly is a process problem. And it changed everything for me because instead of recruiting from behind, I recruited ahead. I got very clear on the core positions. There were 2 or 3 of them that these companies consistently needed. I lined up those talented people before they are needed. And I figured out a process that allowed me to do things quickly back in a time when we didn't have the internet and search engines and all these things. Fast forward to today with all these tools, there's no reason for us to be stuck in doing anything slowly. We can buy, rent, or use pretty much anything in an instant. So this big change for me allowed me to solve lots of process problems with speed, because speed is always a process issue. We can either do it fast because we have the right process, or we're stuck in doing it slow because we have the wrong process.
So do you think you were always a process thinker?
Yeah, I'm a guy and I'm really linear. And I'm able to step back, but I'm pretty black and white. And I'm one of these mindsets where I decide that something's possible and then I just figure out how to do it. And to me, it's black and white, and there are steps and they can be quantified and we can distill it down to something that is simple. And I think I've always thought that way. And when I've tried to make things complex, and believe me, I've tried to do that, it always failed. Because I couldn't sustain the complexity. I think at the end of the day, I'm a pretty simple, straightforward person. And I know now that simple was sustainable. So I think for me, I just somehow came with this mindset baked in because I'm such a black and white thinking guy that likes things to be simple, because simple is sustainable.
It's interesting. I have a couple of friends who went to Juilliard who are musicians and all kinds of things. And they fall into 2 categories, which is completely erratic high creatives who are not particularly process thinking at all, and others who are what I call by scale. You know, they're process thinkers. They think of things in a process. So even in their creative process is actually a linear process, whereas the other ones, it's more of an erratic process. And I don't know that one's better than the other. I'm certainly not saying that for a moment. But it's very interesting. That's why I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned music, and I didn't know that before. So I thought it was kind of interesting, because when we think about musicians or people who take music as a major, we think of them as being high creatives and being more sort of go with the flow. Yeah. And you're talking about always being very much this process guy and breaking down the steps of Mozart or whatever it might be is the same. It's a very interesting thing.
I think you're right. Musicians are quirky. I'll admit that. And to me, I enjoyed writing music and composing, and I was in drum and bugle corps as a kid. And when we were marching from point A to point B, there was a process to get there. That made sense to me. Right. It made sense to me that in order to play this chunk of music, I had to memorize these notes and then learn how to play them in sequence and learn to play the nuances. All of it's a sequence. All of it's a process. I am undiagnosed ADD, and I know I'm ADD because when my son was diagnosed, I was sitting in the office and I was nodding the whole time the doctor was talking about him, thinking he's also talking about me. So part of my process orientation, I think, is it helps me stay focused when it's hard for me to stay focused. And I think a lot of really creative people are either, undiagnosed ADD or diagnosed. And the one way they can stay, 2 ways. One, they find their passion, but then they have a process to work through, and it keeps them focused.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It is very interesting because I'm in that gang too. So, welcome to the club.
Amen.
You've said that how you live your life is the key to your success that you've had in business. What do you mean by that?
I made a very conscious choice years ago. In fact, I articulated it for the first time to a friend who asked me how I lived a balanced but full life. And when it came out of my mouth, I was articulating something I had believed. And what I said to her was this. I said, well, I believe in living the three wells. I stay well, I live well, and I live well below my means. And that is my life philosophy. And when I said it, I went, oh, yeah, that encapsulates it really well. And so it became conscious. So here's what I mean by that is, number one, my number one job is to take care of me. Yes, that sounds incredibly self-centered and selfish, but I'm the only me I've got. Yeah. I'm no use to anybody else if I'm overly tired or hungry or lonely or angry or whatever. So I better take care of me so I can pour from a full cup versus empty one, as we all like to say. I then live well. You know, this isn't about monetary stuff. Yes, I live a nice life, but I live well in that I surround myself with riches. And I'm talking about riches of people and activities and family and experiences. So there's not, you know, in my life, I'm not wanting for something because I take advantage of every opportunity I have. And then living well below my means, yes, that is about money, because if I am overstrapped financially, I'm going to be stressed out. But I think more importantly than money is I live well below my means when it comes to resources. And my biggest resource, time. I used to overschedule myself like crazy. When I stopped doing that is when I was able to say I lived the three wells to this person, because I have abundant time. I don't overschedule. I get lots of sleep. I live well below the means and resources. And when I started doing that, that was a couple decades ago, Dov, I realized that's when I was able to be fully present, be a great leader, be creative, be good to the people around me, because I was being my best self. And so I live that. Now, do I do it perfectly? No. I have moments where I was visiting, I was out in California doing a keynote and then visiting my son who lives out there. And I had the worst West Coast jet lag I've ever had. I don't know why. You know, that was a bit of a struggle to live well below my means. But, you know, that's okay. I had a little bit of an emotional bank account I could draw into, because most of the time I'm successful in doing that. Not perfect, but it's the ideal and I live towards it. And as long as I do it well, and I do most of the time, life's pretty darn good. And I'm pretty effective in the work that I do and the life that I lead as a result.
It's pretty interesting because, you know, talking about ADD, most of the people I know who are ADD also have chaotic schedules. So I find that very interesting that, you know, you've found a way to, I mean, that is almost, you know, hand in hand with being ADD, is to have this overscheduled life because there's so many things going on. So it's very interesting that you were able to do that. What was it that got you to make that realization? Because like I said, seems so natural for ADD people to overschedule themselves.
It was probably when I found yoga, when I first started, you know, understanding mind-body connection. Before that, I'll draw on a Waffle House dining experience. I lived in the true South. I live in Florida now. I lived in Georgia for a short time. And I love how they order things there. One of the dishes they order is scattered, smothered, and covered. I think it's the hash browns. That's how my life was. My life was scattered, smothered, and covered with way too much, too little time, too much responsibility. When I started doing yoga and I started really maturing, thank goodness, I realized it's a horrible way to live. And just the presence of doing yoga, being present where your feet are, where your body are, you start to pay attention to things. And one of them that I was paying attention to was I wasn't liking how I was feeling, how my chaotic life, although it was rich and full and exciting, it was also killing me at the same time. Yeah. And yoga really helped me get very, very present in those moments and make some different decisions.
That was great stuff, man. If you could give our viewers, our listeners, one practical thing that you want them to take away from this interview they could put into action, I always say preferably in the next 24 hours, but certainly in the next 5 working days, what would be the one thing you would want them to get from this conversation?
Go pick one role, just one, and you're going to make it your goal, your responsibility, that job is filled in an instant. It doesn't mean you're going to do it in the next day or 5 days, but you're going to work towards that. So first, you're going to challenge your own counterproductive mindsets. Second, you're going to get very clear on who fits and who does not fit that role. And then third, you're going to start cultivating people ahead of time using those experiential interviews, seeking proof, not promises. And all you got to do is line up one person, even if that role's not, open right now, and then a second. And once you do that, you're giving a gift to yourself because that seat will stay filled, but you're giving it a gift to the person who then gets that job. And you're giving your company a gift as well.
Yeah, that is a great one. Scott, this has been fabulous. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you and all the resources, the fabulous resources that you have, please.
I'd welcome that. So if you go to highvelocityhiring.com, High Velocity Hiring is the name of my book. That'll take you to the book page on my website. You can learn more about that. But make sure you springboard from there to the resource section, and including my blog, have tons of free content that is theirs for the taking.
Fabulous. So highvelocityhiring.com. Get yourself over there. Look at the resources. There's all kinds of great stuff. And that tool you were telling us about that's also accessible through there, right?
It is not. We'll make sure it is in the near future. It's on the Change This site, and we have not linked to it yet. But if people go to changethis.com immediately and just look up my name or High Velocity Hiring, they'll find that. That's on their website.
Fabulous. And we'll make sure that gets into the show notes too. Thank you so much, my man. It's been a real pleasure and honor having you here. Thank you for sharing your time and your insights and your knowledge. We're deeply grateful.
Dov, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you, my man. And to you, dear listener, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive. In that these this is totally in line with what we've been talking about, these fast-growing companies often hit the point where they realize they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, but also have them leaving them at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent, only have them leave you before you got your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets within your organization by helping you and your organization to tap into your purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Also, remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a www, just matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool valued at $197. Is absolutely free. Get yourself over there and assess your leadership in the 5 areas of leadership. Find out where your strengths are, find out where you need to bring your strengths up, and how you can really tap into that to become the kind of leader that you just dream of being. I'm your host, Darl Barron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so that you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the bias you have about hiring slow and firing fast, and why you may need to hire much faster, in fact, in an instant. Till next time, Darth Baron, I'm out.